Welcome to another tutorial about participatory communication. Today we're going to be looking at how to use the herd method for creating participatory radio drama. The herd method, which is an oral radio drama development method. Just to give you a bit of an overview, this method seeks to engage communities to create their own stories, their own dramas that address the issues that they feel need to be addressed, and talk about those issues in a way that they themselves can express what the real issue is, and also what are some of the solutions that they would like to pass on to the audience, encourage people to think about. And so it's a very participatory method, and it's actually a method that is entirely oral as opposed to scripted radio drama. The goal is not to have a uniform group of participants, but you can also engage people from different age groups, different backgrounds, different educational backgrounds that can be brought together, as long as they are able or willing to work together to create the story. That will actually enrich the message of the drama, because through the process, everyone in the group can actually learn from other people's perspectives, and so it's actually a way of also unifying people around the topic and telling the story from different angles. So the main objective of participatory radio drama is actually just to capture the attention of audiences. As you know, today, with the overwhelming amount of information out there, people are generally geared towards watching things or listening to things that are entertaining. People are saturated with information, but what's entertaining or at the same time also educational can still capture the minds and the interest of audiences out there. When people are drawn into a story, if they're listening to it together with other people, there may be also a social component as people discuss the story, as they may even argue with each other about what should have happened or what they expect to happen next. So it's a way of attracting audiences, but it does also help to encourage behavioral change. Again, studies have shown that through entertainment education, which is basically the use of story, people are actually a lot more willing to change their behavior, because they're not just being bombarded with information told, buy this product or that other product, but they're being given a chance to think for themselves, what in this story can I relate to? How would I react? And draw conclusions, not just from the beginning of the story, but from the end as well, from observing the attitudes and the behavior of people in the story, and then drawing conclusions in the end for themselves, which are more likely to lead to behavioral change. Participatory radio drama, if you use it in its real sense, creating a dialogue with the people who are taking part and letting them take the control over the creating of the message and the theme even, can create a very relevant messages and very relevant stories that audiences will be able to relate to, because it's drawn from their own lives. Again, that ensures that you as a communicator, whether that's for Christian ministry purposes or development purposes, are not just bringing in a message or a story from the outset that may not just fully resonate with your audience, but it will make sure that people can really relate to it. Why participatory drama? Why story form? Again, there is another reason for that. Stories are great at addressing issues that are maybe not so easy to talk about in a straightforward way. You can talk about quite sensitive, quite taboo topics that are, for whatever reason, culturally speaking, politically speaking, there are many reasons why certain topics cannot be talked about openly. But in a story, you can just tell a story and let the characters speak out, and that's all fine, because it's just a story. So that's another very powerful aspect of participatory radio drama. And then there are some issues that are very complex, where you can't just say, well, there's a black and white answer here. Clearly, the Bible teaches the following, or this or that, where again the story allows you to draw your audience in and let them see the complexity of all, and the complexity of moral decisions, the complexity of whose side might they be on, and maybe even the fact that everybody has something to learn, but also everybody may have a perspective that's helpful. And life is that way, isn't it? Life is complex, and so rather than crafting a very straightforward message that gives your audience the answer, as it were, People know instinctively that that's not really how life is, whereas in a story they will be able to resonate with it, and they'll be able to say, yeah, I understand this side, I also understand that side, I can relate emotionally to this person, but I don't agree with them. I actually really like how they solve this given the circumstances, etc. So very useful to address for addressing complex topics. Um, Obviously, the people that are involved in your group as you create the drama themselves, they get highly involved because it's their story, it's their emotions that are playing out the story. And you're not excluding anyone because it's an oral process. It doesn't involve being able to read. It doesn't involve being able to write. So you're not excluding anyone. Again, that can be quite important in many cultures where the sort of influential people are sometimes the people who are the elderly in the community that are considered the wise, the people who have the most perspective on life. So giving them the ability to express themselves, but also creating that dialogue between the different ages, the different generations, maybe the different educational backgrounds, is very helpful in many cultures. Um, and then one thing that we shouldn't forget is that in terms of ministry today, especially media ministry, it's not enough to just, translate a couple of texts from the Bible to teach the Christian faith, because people are consuming media on a daily basis. So you can't just, you can't fulfill the needs that people have anymore with just a few contents here and there. People are needing to have something new they can listen to, they can digest every day. So there's a huge pressure on regular content output. And of course, the Bible only has so many stories and so much content that's available. But creating radio drama on a regular basis can just satisfy that need for regular content, so that you can keep your audiences engaged or interested on your channel, or on whether it's a radio station or a social media channel or whatever. It could be a podcast. Because if you don't do that nowadays, your audience will probably move to something else in their media habits, and you won't have that opportunity to keep them engaged, to keep that conversation going. It is also a very good way of strengthening local culture, local identity, because you can create the dramas in any language, whether you already have an orthography system or not, because it's all oral. Again, empowering those who speak that language. In my research, I also discovered that it's actually a great opportunity for the older generation to teach the younger generation their mother tongue, because sometimes out of educational reasons, for schooling reasons, urbanization, rural exodus as well, some of the younger generations will start losing their own mother tongue. Although they are interested in it, it creates a certain gap between them and their parents or their family, and so it can also be a very powerful way of saying your language is very precious, and empower the local identity, the local culture. We're going to be talking now as a next step through the different letters of the method, which is called HEARD, with every letter standing for one of the steps in the process. So first you start out by hearing out heartfelt topics. What does that mean? Basically, first of all, you want to make sure people can actually relax enough so that they can speak from their heart. That's something that's not always easy to achieve. You may not want to have people sit in chairs, for example, facing the same direction. You may not even want people to be sitting inside a room. You might want to go outside. You might be seating people in a circle. You might also want some people to sit slightly differently from others for cultural reasons, whether that's the young people or the women. But whatever it is, you're going to try to seat people in a way that they can face each other and that they can react to each other, and create a dialogue around what are their topics, what are the issues that they face. And you want to make sure those topics that are heartfelt come out or emerge. So sometimes in the beginning, when people start saying, I want to talk about, let's say, agripastoral conflict, or I want to talk about, I don't know, sex education in school, or I want to talk about corruption, whatever it is, these can be little bits and ideas here and there. They're usually quite dry in the beginning, and that's okay. But as you keep discussing the different options that are there, you want to start asking also a little bit more from the people that suggest the topic, and say, how come this is so important to you? Did you have an experience with this? Tell us a little bit more. And you'll be able to tell in people's faces, if you're the facilitator of this process, whether this is a heartfelt topic, whether they're willing to talk more or not, and maybe even if some other people will pick up the topic and say, yes, I can tell a story about that topic. So make sure the topics are heartfelt, because the more heartfelt your topics are, the easier it will be afterwards to create your drama. And then once you've had everybody share their different topics, and by the way, you do want to keep repeating orally what people have said, just to give people time to think and digest and remember, because you're not really supposed to be taking any notes. Writing down can make some people feel excluded, and so repeating, over here we've had this topic, over here and we've had this other topic, etc., is a way of just keeping in everybody's mind where we're at and what has been talked about so far. But after you've collected the various ideas and you feel like nobody wants to suggest any more ideas, you can move on to the next step, which is to encourage endorsement. Basically, this means you're going to ask your participants, does anybody here actually prefer somebody else's topic? Or does anybody here want to jump on somebody's topic and say, I encourage that, and maybe even tell us a bit more why you think that's important? And it's this endorsement process that will actually start to help you as a group to identify which are the main topics that seem to resonate with most. And one thing that happens often is that people will start also arguing for their own topic. So if they see that their own topic isn't becoming very popular, and you can even encourage people to do that, to argue for their own topic, give more reasons why it's important. But if they see that it's not being accepted or very much endorsed by others, they may tell you a bit more background and tell maybe another testimony related to that topic, and in order to convince others that their topic is very important. So that can happen, and again, that just encourages more dialogue and more clarity on what topics or what main topic you're going to do your drama on. Another thing that happens often is that certain topics start overlapping. Now, let me just give an example of this. Let's say you've had somebody say agripastoral conflict in the group, and they've argued that this happened to them in their field, and their field was destroyed and whatnot. And somebody else in the group might say, yes, I agree with that topic. This is a big problem. But then somebody else says, well, my topic is corruption, and they give reasons for that. Now, as you dig deeper, you start realizing that actually agripastoral conflict and corruption are intertwined, because when people's fields are destroyed by the local cattle herders, it is actually the cattle owners that will go and bribe the village chief so that nothing is done about the damage. So you start realizing, there are topics that overlap. This is just an example, but this happens very frequently. And actually, as these topics overlap, they actually give us already a sense of a story. In this case, bribing the chief so that a damaged field isn't being taken into account, there is no reimbursement or anything to the farmer, already is the beginning of a story, isn't it? So this is the sort of thing that happens as the participants start endorsing each other's topics. So you might end up having two topics that are really key. You might still want to push towards identifying which one's the main one, but that conversation will keep you moving towards the story that you want to create as a group. And then once you have a strong idea of the main topic and maybe some other related topics, you start saying, okay, well, what happens? You agree on the needed actors and action. Now, it can often take the form of starting with action to say, okay, where does the story start? Where are we at? Somebody might say agripastoral conflict is our main topic. Let's start in the field. Let's say a boy has taken some cattle out into a field, and he thinks nobody's watching, and he's hungry, he's tired, he's not really being paid much for his work, so he leaves the cows there because he knows they're not going to go anywhere, and he runs off to town to get some water or whatever it is, or buy some food. Scene 1, there we go, that's where the story starts. So that's the action. So you need to think in terms of scenes. What happens? Where are we? Who is there? That's the part that we call actors. Who is actually there? Whether it's just a boy and there's some cattle. Is there anything else in that scene? We could say, well, in the same time and place, so in that same scene, just as he's wanting to walk off, two farmers appear. And then you say, well, who are they? Is it a man and a woman? Is it two women? Do men and women even go to the farms together? You see, it will immediately connect with the realities that people that people experience, and so you start identifying the actors as well. And if you struggle with identifying what happens in a scene or in the next scene, what happens in the story, one thing that's really, really helpful that I would really encourage you to do quite soon is to say, okay, we have this character, we have a young man or a young boy who's the cattle herder. Okay, who's going to play that role? And often people will jump on it and say, I'll play that role, or they'll say, I think this other person over here would make a great corrupt pastor, or this woman over here would be great for the, I don't know, whatever it is, the aggressive lady in the market that throws the table over of her neighbor's stand, or whatever it is. And you see, sometimes people will actually say, I want to play that role. I love that role, A, because I've experienced that, or because I can just put my emotions into that. So you'll see quite quickly that once people have taken on certain roles, they will help even more with thinking along what's going to happen. And even the others around them who haven't taken a role yet, they are thinking in terms of the story as they look at that person in the group who is playing that role. And that, again, makes the story process, the story development process, more powerful and more effective. Think in terms of settling on 3 to 5 scenes. That's quite important, because sometimes what happens, let's say you stay in scene 1, the cattle herder, the young man, is there in the field, and there are 2 ladies there that are farmers or whatever, and then people sometimes tend to think in real time. So they say, okay, after that the boy walks in, runs away, and then we follow him as he runs away. He jumps over a small river, but then lands in the mud, etc. And you start getting into a lot of details and a lot of events in the story that are not necessary. So in participatory radio drama, you just need to keep telling people that there are things that happen that we don't need to tell in the story in detail, in chronological order. There are main scenes that happen, and they don't have to happen in the same place or at the same time, but they are the main ones that have to be told, so that we can come to our conclusion. So just keep fighting that concept that after the boy runs away, the next scene has to be, where does the boy go? No, the next scene could be, the cattle owner arriving at the chief's palace and bribing him. And people can deduct from what happens there what might have happened in between. That's just reality. That's how films work, and that's how even people tell stories. So our minds are very capable of filling in the gaps. So just don't fall into that temptation of telling too many details that are not important. And by the way, as you go through this step of talking about action and actors, it's very important to keep summarizing. Okay, scene 1, present are the following actors. The action is this and this. This is what happens. Okay, fine. Now, scene 2, what happens? Who is present? Where are we? Just keep summarizing over and over again so that everybody keeps listening and taking part. And if you do that, you're going to really make sure that everybody's thinking along the same lines, everybody understands the story, and everybody can contribute in making it better. Because as you summarize it, somebody says, actually, let's not have them do this. Let's have them do this other thing, or let's actually add this person over here. So it's an oral process, but you need to do a lot of repetition just to clarify what happens. And also, don't always feel like you need to say all the details. When you summarize, try to be quite short, because you'll see that the details will be filled in once the story is being acted out, once it's being improvised. Alright, so you want to work towards having a final concept of the whole story, and you will see that as you talk through what happens in scene 1, scene 2, etc., try not to have more than 5 scenes. It will naturally lead you to tell the story and build a message into the story, because you have to have some kind of main conflict, maybe a secondary conflict, and also you want to kind of resolve that conflict so that there's some moral learning that you can teach your audience. Your audience might learn from negative outcomes, negative decisions, just as much as they learn from positive decisions. And generally people learn best if your actors are not stereotypically good or stereotypically bad, but there may be some growth in the person. They may first hesitate or not be courageous or whatever it is, and then towards the end they might change a little bit and see that actually they have been able to overcome something or make a better decision than they first wanted to. etc. So keep summarizing your persona, your scenes, what happens in them, your action, your actors, until you have somewhere between 3 and 5 scenes. As I said earlier, assign your roles to encourage more participation. That can be very important. Exactly. You do not need to represent all events within the scene. Imply the missing gaps through conversation, through dialogue, and the story can be summarized that way. Another way that you can do that is to have a phone call within a scene. Somebody might call one of the actors in the story, and that can create a connection to something that happened in addition, because they are hearing that on the phone, and then everybody listening to that drama knows, oh, this other thing happened as well, and make sure that there's continuation of the scenes. Alright, so once you've agreed on the needed actors and action, basically you then jump into recording and reviewing the scenes repeatedly until they are ready. What do I mean by that? It's very important to know that when you do this the first time, some of your participants might still say, well, how are we going to do this? And tell me again what I need to say. And that's fine. Just repeat their roles. Help them to understand who they are, what their emotions are. But also you want to make sure that they really act out naturally in their roles. You don't want to have people memorize any lines. You just want them to know who they are and what happens and what their attitudes are, and sort of how their reaction, their dialogue is going to move the story forward. And you'll see that by doing that, actually, people speak extremely naturally. Their emotions are very natural as well, and actually it saves you time. Compared to scripting radio drama, it actually saves you a lot of time. Sometimes you can record an entire scene in one take, and you don't even have to repeat it. But it is important to record a scene in one go, and then review it as a group and say what went well, did everything get communicated in this scene that needed to be, etc. And then after reviewing it, you improvise the scene again. I'll say more about that in a moment. Let me just also just explain a little bit from a technical side. So I really encourage you to record only with one recorder. The reason being that if you record with more recorders, people will be speaking at the same time over each other, and that can be complicated. Whereas if you have one recorder, it actually helps you to control where the conversation's happening, and it's a tool for even for the participants to indicate that they want to say something, or for you as a facilitator to move the microphone to somebody else to start encouraging them to take the voice, to start speaking. Make sure you keep your microphone close enough to the mouth of the person that's talking. But you will see that even if you're recording one person and somebody else speaks into that conversation, because naturally people will talk at the same time. That's just how people are. That other voice will still be heard somewhat, and it will give a sense of three-dimensional space, because the audiences will hear that, okay, we're close to this person over here, that other person seems to be standing at an angle over there, etc. So there's no real problem if people's audio levels aren't exactly the same at all times. But what is important is that you're able to follow the movement of the people speaking. You can also record using a mobile phone. Just make sure that the quality is good enough. You can use very sophisticated equipment or less sophisticated equipment. What's probably more important is the sensitivity setting of your recorder. I really encourage you to use low sensitivity for the main dialogue or conversations that carry the story. And even at that setting, record the whole scene. And that includes also the sound effects, the ambient sound in the room or in the location where you're recording a scene. Because those sound effects are kind of in the background. It might be somebody pouring a bit of water to welcome a guest into their house. It might be a little dog that's yapping in the background, or somebody cooking something over the fire, whatever it is, or opening a door or knocking on a door. Those kinds of sound effects, you want to record them at the same time as the story is being told. And we'll get into that in a moment. You're actually acting out the story, not just through dialogue, but through as much physical enactment as you can, so that you're recording those sound effects along with the dialogue. But the dialogue should not be overpowered by those ambient sounds. So that's why I keep the sensitivity low, and also that ensures that the person that's closest to your microphone, the main person talking in that moment, can be heard clearly, and there isn't too much overlap of people speaking into that or talking to that person or reacting to that person. So that's clear. Where is the story going? Where are we actually? Who's the main person talking at the moment? And of course, besides all of this, it makes it easier for people to have the equipment they need because they only need one recorder. Now, when it comes to recording ambient sound effects that you can't record naturally as you're recording a scene, that's something where you might want to set your recorder at a high sensitivity. Let's say you're in the field, you're pretending to be out in the field, and you're pretending to have your cattle there, and the young man is sitting down, sighing, and thinking about how hungry he is and whatnot. And the farmers appear and all that. You might even go out into the forest if you can, because you'll hear the birds, the sound of the trees with the wind blowing through them, or whatever it is. You'll see that will create a more natural environment for your recording. But you might not have any cattle present, so if you're needing to then record the cattle separately, obviously you could download cattle sound effects also online. But most of the time, it's better to record ambient sound effects naturally and maybe separately if you can't do it otherwise. And for that sort of thing, you do want to keep your sensitivity high on your recorder. So that's just a little bit about the technicality of recording. So keep your recording very dynamic by encouraging the actors to act the scenes out physically. That might even involve a rustle, a bit of a physical fight, or pushing or pulling. You see here in these images as well that people actually really get into it, and the more they get into it physically, the more their dialogue becomes natural. But if people were to be sitting down and not be able to move, it's very hard for them to then also feel in their mind, in the way they express themselves, what's really happening in the story. It's also important that as people act out the scene, they do it physically, because then you're avoiding the risk of thinking that you're going to be able to narrate what happens in between. You're not supposed to narrate anything. It's important to note this. Don't think that you're going to fill in the gap of what happens in between by just narrating. That would be a lot of extra work, and it would be also less engaging for your audience. Your audience is intelligent and can imagine a lot, and sometimes all you need to have is a sound effect of somebody walking over gravel or opening a door. The environment noise is changing, and people already start to associate and understand what's happening. So make sure that what happens is carried by the dialogue. The audience wants to discover for themselves what happens. So you want to have, as I said earlier, authentic ambient sound effects. So that's also another reason why acting out the scenes physically is so important. And then it's very important also if you have rapidly evolving conversations where several people, at least two, are responding to each other back and forth, that you stay close to the actors and that they may not face each other but face the same direction. So for example, here the girl and the boy are talking to each other, but they're facing the facilitator so that she can move left and right with the microphone and capture their responses to each other, rather than having to somewhere be between them as they face each other. Of course, you still want them to be able to see each other, because their emotions, even their nonverbal communication, will inspire the way they talk to each other. And also, if you're not sure about your levels, if you want to make sure you're not going too close to people's mouths, or you're not keeping too far away, it can be a good idea, if you're not so experienced with the recorder you're using, or generally not so experienced, just to use a headset to monitor the recording and to make sure if something goes wrong, you're aware of it. Again, do not stop the recording of the scene somewhere in between as soon as something goes wrong. Let the scene be recorded all the way through, whether it's take one or take two, whatever take it is, because that allows the actors to get into a routine, to get the flow of the story into their hearts, into their minds, and then be able to act it out again more naturally without stress. If you interrupt them every time, and sometimes the participants in the group will try to do that unless you explain the rules for that. If you interrupt them, that can actually be very frustrating and unsettling, and make it more difficult for you to succeed in recording the the whole scene in one go. Now, when it comes to improvising and recording entire scenes, it is at the end of taking, let's say, take one, that you go into reviewing and repeating, because it's at the end that people can say, I didn't like this, or I really like this other thing. Start with the positives, but also then collect ideas for things that could be improved. Don't, as I said before, don't interrupt and then play on again and then interrupt again. It becomes very fragmented and very hard for the actors to remember what they should improve, and also even to remember the story if you do those kinds of interruptions. So this is basically how it works. Let everybody take part. Let people mostly give feedback after acting out a take, and then improving it and doing a take two, etc., until everybody says, yeah, we like that scene take, we've successfully recorded that in one go, and then move on to the next scene. Once you have all your scenes recorded, it's also very important to record the title of your radio drama, and then also the names of the participants. And the way I like to do that is I like to record the title. Anybody in the group can say the name of the title, but then also add created by, and then you actually move the microphone from one person to another and everybody says their name, because as people listen to that radio drama and hear the title and then hear all the people that are taking part in different voices, right away that's more engaging than being just read a couple of names on a list. So to summarize, record all your scenes until you have each one of them in one final good version. Record your title, and then also record the names of your participants with the actors themselves saying their names. And also, if it ever happens that somebody is not an actor, hasn't taken on a role in the story, let them still say their name. Don't skip them, because they have been a vital part of creating that drama, and so their name should be there at least. Maybe even take people like that to read the title of the story. It is actually quite rare. You can almost always find a role, even if it's very marginal, for people, because everybody does want to have their voice in a drama. So you can find, let's say if you have a scene at the palace that we mentioned earlier with the cattle owner arriving, why don't you just add a person there that works at the palace and brings out a chair or whatever it is, or brings some water, or just, you can add these sort of minor roles into the story very easily. You just have to think of it and make sure that in that way everybody's involved. Alright, so this is very important. And just one more thing about the feedback. If during the recording people have great ideas, or they can see on the face of a person that they're not remembering what they should have said, or how the conversation continues, sometimes people will go in and whisper into a person's ear and a new idea or how to continue. And actually sometimes that can be very helpful. But please do that in the moment that the person's not speaking, because otherwise that can be recorded into the recording, so that can be quite problematic. Alright, so there we go. That's the heard method. So you hear out heartfelt topics, you encourage endorsement, you agree on needed actors and action, and then you record and review repeatedly until you're ready. And then the last part is digitally editing your radio drama for distribution, for diffusion. Again, I want to say, you're not creating content to be stored online. You're creating content that actually is supposed to create engagement and conversation. So make sure you think about that. Where am I going to be playing this radio drama? What radio station am I going to play it on? Is there going to be a live show following the drama in which people can call in and say, tell their stories that were similar, or tell us what they think about how people acted in that story, or maybe followed by debate, maybe even a Bible study related to that topic. Alright, well, I wish you all the best. We're at the end of this tutorial. I hope your facilitation goes well. I hope you can have many good experiences with this method, and engage many people through it and bring them to God's Word. And bring God's Word to them as well. If you'd like to know more about how to edit a participatory radio drama, here's a tutorial video on YouTube. You can just follow this QR code. There is also a YouTube video where you will hear testimonies of users and what they experienced with this method when they were first exposed to this. Again, you can follow this code. And finally, if you'd like to know more about the academic background, the research behind the methodology, you can read this article on the Scripture Engagement website. You can also download a free manual. It's a course manual if you'd like to teach a couple of people how to use this method. There are a couple of ideas here and resources, and a step-by-step guide in terms of what the method is all about and how to use it. So this is designed for workshops, for courses, if you'd like to teach others how to use it. And finally, if you're interested in reading the MA research behind this methodology, you can find this here under this link. Thanks for watching.